Okay, we're going to come up with some possible conclusions as to what these aliens are. Now, I've gone over quite a bit. I've talked about these gray aliens that are tall, the Nordics that are humanoid looking, usually blonde or no hair, but very white and blue-eyed. I've talked about these little grays that are smaller than humans. I've talked about modern-day UFO abductees such as Travis Walton and Betty and Barney Hill and even Enoch, and how all of them talked about a window or display of stars and how the angels or aliens told them all about the stars. I've talked about old text. I've linked all the mythologies to the Semitic religions, to fallen angels, to gods and goddesses, and how they were described as androgynous in the esoteric Semitic writings, as well as in mythology. I've talked about the continual abductions of human women and impregnation, which really didn't seem to be sexual, and that the abductee always seemed to have had an hallucination during impregnation. I've talked about the various evidence and eyewitness accounts of flying ships throughout history. And I briefly mentioned some of the strange technology that has been talked about in ancient mythology and also by psychics such as Edgar Cayce or researchers such as Helen Blavatsky. I've talked about ancient underground cities that have always been there, that have always been talked about globally. And I've talked about Atlantis and previous Earth ages and previous Earth cataclysms. I even briefly touched on the theory of evolution and the anthropological record to show that there are even anomalies that are unexplained today, specifically concerning the brain capacity of hominids that came before the current human race hominid. I've talked about elongated skulls and how it always seems to run in the royal families and the priesthoods. So, what are the possible answers to this phenomenon? And I've come up with several. The first one is that all of this alien stuff is either an elaborate government concoction to cover up secret military bases and testing, and it's based on ancient folklore. The second, more than likely conclusion, based on the evidence I've seen, is that these are creatures that came from Atlantis in some way, and they have successfully turned the tables on the human race that created them. The third is that we are modifications of another race that existed on this planet that rose to a high technological state, destroyed their world, and they bred out of existence, and we and them are what is left. The fourth is that the Chronides were simply white people from long ago, and they had to rebuild society and advance it. But they had genitalia just like us, and they were taller and Caucasoid. But they used their wits and leftover technology to subdue the rest of the human race. The fifth is a combination of any of the previously mentioned possibilities. The sixth is that these grays were on the earth before modern humans, even though the anthropological record states that we go back at least 7 to 8 million years on this planet. But the possibility that these grays were here first, rose to a technologically advanced society, and they were egg layers, and they destroyed their planet and created an environment that they could no longer survive on the surface. And so they went underground, kept their technology, had surpassed the requirement of sexual reproduction or egg-laying reproduction and used technology to completely reproduce. And they created humans to do their bidding on the surface and gather what they need. Now, I do find this hard to believe. It is possible, but any non-sexually reproducing race would have died out a long time ago. It would be incredibly hard to survive and keep the technology going. The seventh is that these are interdimensional beings, what we call demons and angels, and we really still don't quite understand where they came from. 8, it could be a combination of everything I just said. I don't believe it is just a concoction of our imagination. There's way too much evidence throughout history, globally, as well as these strange skeletons with elongated skulls that still have no explanation and simply aren't a product of head binding. We need to look further. We cannot trust the governments and the current scholars to give us answers or any priestcraft. I do find it interesting that although Hollywood may portray these aliens as nefarious, all of the abductions seem to point otherwise. They don't seem to hurt humans. They seem to harvest us for our reproductive elements. But they always seem to return people back without harm. There are different variations. There are tall grays, small grays, Nordics. Some people even say greenish to brown reptilian type beings, and some hybrids that look more like a human hybrid and a gray alien hybrid than a Nordic. We don't know what the combinations are truly coming from, but I'm going to guess from the human genetic stock and whatever this creature originally came from. If we did create this creature, or these combination of creatures in the past, we need to own up to that, and we should not harm them. Whatever the situation is, whether they came before us or we came before them, it doesn't matter. It would be nice to know, but we do need to bring them out and find out what they are. And we can't have these priests and pseudo-scientists dictating to us what history is when we have so many anomalies that we know that they're liars and that they intentionally destroy any kind of leftovers or any person that looks into these situations seems to end up dead or missing or defamed. We can't allow that anymore. We need to get the truth. We need to know. We need to bring these beings out into the light. And as I said, we need to act humanely if we did create them. If it was the other way around, they have to... Either way, they can't be in control of us. Now, it's interesting, there is a biblical passage about enmity between the woman and the seed of the serpent. So, even that is telling you there's different species on this planet. That is it for this part of the series. I may do multiple addendums to the series. I am working on a book. It will be out eventually. And I'll be continuing on with my research. Thank you for listening to Alien Agenda Unmasked. Thank you.